All right. Good afternoon. My name is Greg Sperling. I'm part of the Stratford Veterans Museum volunteers, and I am here today on December 23rd, 2022 at the Stratford Veterans Museum to interview Michael Sumple. Sumple. He is a former Specialist 5, United States Army during the Korean conflict period and afterwards. So, did you volunteer or were you drafted?
I volunteer.
You volunteered.
Yeah.
Where did you grow up?
Pardon?
Where did you grow up?
Okay, I was born in Bridgeport, but we moved to Main Street, Stratford, in 1940. And I grew up as a kid. There's a big white house with a front porch on the corner of Highland Avenue and Main Street. There's a couple of houses on Highland Avenue now, but that's where I grew up. And went to garden school, and then we moved from Main Street to Whippoorwill Lane, and then I got transferred to Putney School. Went to Putney School for I think 2 years, and I missed the bus ride by 1/10 of a mile. You had to be 1 mile to get a bus ride, and we were 9-10, so I had to ride my bike the whole length of Whippoorwill Lane, and then eventually I think it was 2 years, I went to Putney for 2 years, and then I switched to Eli Whitney, and then I was the first graduating class of David Worcester, junior high, and then I graduated Stratford High in 1957.
Okay.
And then I went into the Army, and then after that, I
around.
lived in different places.
Okay. So you went into the service right after high school?
No, I went in at about a year and a half, I think it was.
Okay. What helped make that decision for you to join?
My father had passed away, and my other brothers were gone, and I just wanted to go in and serve for the country, so I basically joined the Army.
Any particular reason why you joined the Army?
Well, basically to serve the country.
Why the Army and not another service? Is there anything in particular?
Well, I wanted to get into electronics, and the Army had radar schools. So I went to a radar school in Pennsylvania. And then from there I got shipped to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, which is our artillery base. And I did my basic training in Texas. I can't remember the place. Then I went to Fort Sill for additional radar training, and then I got shipped to Korea from Fort Sill.
Your first days in boot camp, what were they like? What do you remember about those initial days?
I mean, it was boot camp. I mean, you lived in the barracks with a bunch of guys, and you got up and you did different activities every day and training, and shoot. We of course did shooting with M1 rifles and stuff like that.
During your boot camp?
8 weeks of boot training, basically.
Any time during your initial training where you were like, well, why did I do this?
No, because
okay.
I mean, you're in with a bunch of young kids, like yourself. So I mean,
so there was no regrets, or
it was always fun at times.
Alrighty. And so you said that after you finished your training, you were shipped over to Korea.
Yes.
And what were you doing at that time? What was your job?
When I got shipped, we flew to Japan. Then from Japan, we flew into South Korea, and then I got stationed at Camp Casey, South Korea, which was the big base over there for the Army, and I got shipped up to the DMZ, to an Army Security Agency compound, and then we had a radar site on the DMZ. The DMZ is 3 miles wide, and the North Koreans could come in 1.5 miles, and we could go in 1.5 miles. So the radar site was on the DMZ. We weren't in the DMZ, but on the DMZ, and we used to watch the North Koreans at nighttime with the radar and daytime. And they used to, come into their half of the DMZ just to cause trouble. So I did that for basically, well, I was supposed to be there 10 months, and the Berlin crisis hit, and I got extended 90 days, so I was basically over there for 13, 14 months.
Okay.
And
And it
then I
sounds,
came back to the States, and I came back to Fort Sill again to finish out the balance of my tour.
and it sounds like it was like a chess game most days with the North Koreans coming into the spaces that they weren't supposed to. Was there, any tense moments where you thought maybe things were going to boil over?
Sometimes they came in with a lot of tanks and a lot of troops, because the radar screen looked like a TV screen, but when all the armor and troops came in, we were picking up the steel helmets and steel tanks, and the screen just lit up like a light bulb.
And then what was the reaction?
So you knew, well, then the South Koreans, the DMZ, there's like mountains on both. All right, on our side there was a mountain, if I remember right, but there was the South Koreans, there was tunnels in the mountain where the radar set was, and all the South Koreans were in there with, some American troops too. But the activity picked up when, the North Koreans came in with a big troop and equipment.
Okay. Did anything ever, boil over? Were there shots exchanged across
The best I can
DMZ?
remember, there was never big artillery fire. There might have been rifle shots and stuff like that, but nothing major.
Okay. And what was your living situation like when you were there?
We were in a Quonset hut, and we kept it clean and so forth. And being in an Army agency security compound, we had real good food. We had tables with tablecloths. We had china, silverware, instead of mess kits if you were back, back at Camp Casey. So we were, as far as living conditions and eating, there was no complaints at all. It was really, really good.
And what about the weather? I've heard that Korea's
Weather-
comparable to the Northeast.
Winter it was
but
cold, summer it was hot,
Okay.
sweaty.
A lot of humidity.
Yeah. And then it's amazing, after the war, there were no trees, no bushes. I mean, everything was stripped. And the South Koreans, if there was any branches or anything that could be burned, they would pick it up and take it back to their hutches, and they would burn. They had a basement or a crawl space, and they used to burn that, and then they had a stone floor, and the heat heated the floor, and that's how they survived in the wintertime.
Okay. And what did you do off duty hours when you weren't on the radar
Off
site?
duty, we would go down to Seoul, to Camp Casey, which was the big,
Okay.
and there was a lot more things, and you could go to a movie,
Sure.
things like that.
Now, was that like every weekend, or was that like
No,
once a month, or how often did you get to do
You
that?
probably do that. I would say maybe anywhere from 2 to 3 months.
Okay. All right. And how did you keep in contact with your family at home?
Letters.
Letters? How long? You remember how long they took to get?
Oh, you're talking, if I remember, a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Because they would fly the mail back to California, then it got distributed back then, and
Okay.
but
Do you have?
we communicate with family.
Okay. Did you do you have a most memorable moment that you had while you were serving overseas?
Well, since I got extended for 90 days and because of the Berlin crisis, I said I got to get out of here, and I went to Hong Kong for 2 weeks vacation,
Okay.
and that was a fun trip, interesting trip. Hong Kong is the mainland, and the island, which they call, if I remember right, was Kowloon. The mainland and Kowloon. The island was Kowloon, and there was a boat that went back, and it was the Star Ferry, if I remember correctly, and you took the Star Ferry back and forth. But then we could go up to, when we were on the mainland, you could go up to the Chinese border, and, there was guards over there, so you couldn't cross over into China, so.
Nor did you want to.
We,
probably.
kept active, this is, in the trip. So, for 2 weeks, we had a lot of fun.
All right, good. And what, you came at the decision point at some point, do I stay in the Army, do I get out of the Army, or was that,
No, I had further ambitions. I wanted to serve my country. I did it, and after that, they wanted me to they wanted me to go to Vietnam, and if I wanted to remember right back then, they were offering, I think it was a $2,000 bonus to re-up to go to Vietnam, and they said no. I served my country. Take me home.
all right. And so you go back to Fort Sill, you said? Is that what you?
I returned to Fort Sill to finish out the balance of my time. It was like 4 weeks or something.
Oh, okay. And then you were discharged,
Yeah.
and upon discharge, what did you do?
Well, upon discharge, I took the train back to Connecticut, and I got a job at UPS as a driver until I found something that I wanted to do. But originally, I came back and I lived with my sister in Monroe, Connecticut, with my mother, because my father had passed away at the VA hospital before I even went to Korea. And so I lived with my aunt on Light Street in Stratford, over by Boston Avenue.
Yeah.
And I lived there and I worked for UPS, and then I got a job at, not AT&T, I'm trying to think of the company. We used to install all the telephone equipment for
Southern New England?
Southern New England.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of the company. But, Western Electric.
Okay.
Yeah, they had a place in Orange on the Boston Post Road. So I worked for them for, I think about 2-3 years. And then I got an offer to go to US Electrical Motors in Milford. And I went to work with them, and then I got laid off in the late 60s. And I got into the building business through a neighbor of mine. So I did that for 3 years, got married, and got married in Devon, actually. My wife was from Devon, and I was still living in Stratford. And then I had bought a house up in Monroe. And we moved there and had a family, had 5 kids.
Good.
So,
All right. How do you think, or your military career and your service helped you later on in life? Do you think it had an impact? And if so, how?
no, I mean, I was a pretty independent person all my life, even as a kid. Because my father went into the VA hospital in 1950, just when we moved from Main Street to Whippoorwill Lane. And then 4 years later, he had passed away. And but as a kid, I was very independent. I had 2 paper routes: the Bridgeport Telegram, the Bridgeport Post. I used to run the Hilltop Drive, Whippoorwill Lane, all those streets up there. I delivered the newspapers back in those days, and so I was independent, but I was a worker. I didn't just hang around and do nothing.
Okay. Did you develop any close friends in the military that you've kept in contact with?
There was just a couple, mainly in Korea, but they lived in different parts of the country.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How about any service organizations? Have you joined the VFW or the American Legion? Were you ever involved in
No.
those? No. All right. All right. Good. And as far as your awards and decorations, did you have any personal awards while you were in the military?
Oh God. Not that I can remember.
No, okay.
No.
Would probably be on your paperwork that I have here, actually. Okay. Any reunions, any type of military reunions that have you attended over the years? If there's been any that you were aware of?
No.
No? Okay. All right. Any further education? Did you use your GI Bill when you came
When I
back?
came back, I went to University of Bridgeport for 2 years, and then I got married and that ended the going to school.
Right.
Because at that point, well, I was working at U.S. Motors, and then I got laid off, so I had to find work, to take care of we just started the family. Well, actually, Tracy, she was born in 1964. Then another daughter, 65, and then 3 boys after that, a year apart. So we had 5 kids in like 7, 8 years.
Okay.
So I had to feed the family.
And so what were you doing for work when you retired?
Before I retired or after?
Right, before you retired, up until you
I
retired.
had my own businesses. I worked for a company in Stanford, electrostatic component. And the name of the company was Interad. They imported electrostatic equipment for powder coatings. And powder coatings is unique in the sense that you put a charge onto powdered paint. The powdered paint was like flour, came in colors. And it would stick to the metal objects, which were at ground potential, and it would go into an oven and bake it. And all your power equipment and your appliances back in the 70s were powder coated, and then it got into a lot more, and eventually they powder coated vehicles. So I worked for that company. I started with like 7. There's only 7 employees, and when I finished, at one time I was in charge of manufacturing. I was in customer service at first, then we started to build a lot of stuff ourselves. And we designed total finishing systems, so we bought a lot of equipment in the US to build the systems. And I had like, at one time I had like 40 people working for me in Fairfield, Connecticut. And to make a long story short, we got into electrostatic coating, but with liquid paint. There was a French company, Samez, that made this high solid liquid paint, but to get it to atomize and break up, they had equipment that, if I remember, it was like 30,000 RPM, which really broke up the paint particles into fine mist, and it was just like the powder coating, but liquid. It was attracted to the metal part, and then went into an oven, you bake it out, but that was big in the automotive. Okay. And in the late 70s, maybe 1980, we got a big order from General Motors was over $1 million. So I built a lot of equipment and so forth, and we shipped it, and unfortunately General Motors went on strike, and once they go on strike, you won't get a vehicle past the gate.
Right.
Past it. And I had to shut the business down because we couldn't pay the bills.
Right.
Because we didn't get paid. And the SOM is the liquid section, we kept that alive in Norwalk, Connecticut. And I stayed there for maybe a year. And I decided to start my own business in powder coatings because, I did everything with Interad Corporation. So I started my own business in 82, 83. And I was living in Bridgeport then, and I ran that for about almost 15 years, and the Japanese came in with equipment. I couldn't match their prices, and I closed that business down. Then I started another business and environmental equipment for homes and businesses. And I did that for 3 years, I think. And then I went into I started another company. It was a company out of Florida, and it was geothermal. And what they had was, they had equipment that you drill holes in the ground, put copper tubing down into the ground, run refrigerant through it, and would come back to a heat pump, and you heat it and air condition your homes. And so there's geothermal water loop, and then there's geothermal with the refrigerant, which was easier to install, especially in Connecticut, because when you drill down with the water loop system, you had to go down 200-300 feet, and you could hit a lot of stuff, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
With the system that I used, the copper tubing only had to go 100 feet, and we could drill a small hole instead of a big hole, so it was a lot cheaper.
Okay.
So I did that till 2007. Yeah, 2007, and then I just retired.
Okay, good. And I understand Tennessee is home now?
I moved to Tennessee 2 years ago.
What drew you there?
Pardon?
What drew you to Tennessee?
Well, I've been going to Tennessee. The wife and I have been going down there. I had property down there. We were going to move in one area, and then I bought some other property, and we were going to, still move down there. She worked for a law firm in New York City, and she worked till she was 71.
Wow.
I couldn't get her to quit because I was retired at that point for 7 years. So anyway, we put the house up for sale, I don't know, 5 years ago. Nobody even looked at it. And unfortunately in 2020, she got ALS disease, and within a year she died.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
So I went down and bought a house in Tennessee, because our intentions were to go down there all the time. Came back, sold a house in New Milford, and moved down. I bought the house in February 2 years ago, but I didn't move down until June, so I've been there a year and a half.
Okay. Anything we didn't talk about you think it's important to talk about?
No, all the family is back in Connecticut, except for one. I have one in Pennsylvania. And but the rest of the family is either Monroe, Southbury. Well, I have a daughter down in Georgia.
Okay.
And so it's, the trip back, why I'm here today is I, came back for the holidays to see the family.
And obviously you said your dad was in the VA hospital. When did he serve, and what service did he serve in?
He went to the VA hospital in West Haven.
Yep.
They just opened it in 1950.
Right.
And he was there, and came home from my oldest brother's wedding in '54. And he got pneumonia, and he had tuberculosis. That's what he was in the hospital for, but he died of pneumonia.
What service was he in?
He was in the Army back in World War I.
World War I.
Yeah.
Wow. What did he do in the Army? Do you know?
No.
What his job was? No, never
We
talked
never
about
talked
it.
about it because I was still a kid at that point.
Yeah.
And
Go ahead.
My mother and father just bought the house in Whipple Lane, and within less than a year, we wound up in the hospital.
Wow.
So, like I said, that's when I had 2 paper routes,
Yeah.
and my mother did whatever she could do to keep the family together.
Did you have any siblings that joined the military? Or were you it?
No.
No? Okay. All right, great.
Well, I take that back. No, my oldest brother was in the Air Force,
Okay.
so he was in Germany.
All right.
But the other son did.
No. All right. Well, I thank you very much for your time. Thanks for stopping in on your vacation up to Connecticut for the holidays and telling us your story.
I was interested to see the place. Tracy was telling me all about it.
Yeah.
And, I was happy to, you know, help out with the donation.
No, we appreciate that very much.
You know, I
We do.
appreciate the military because, you know, I was in it, and
Yeah.
when I see the pictures of guys and so forth that got wounded, you know, fortunately I wasn't any fighting, so. But, you know, when I see young guys with missing limbs and stuff, it hurts me to see it.
I appreciate your time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.